to our International Financial Reporting for Non-Profit Organization webinar. And the theme of our webinar is Taking the Future of Non-Profit Financial Reporting, a discussion with the South African stakeholders. I mean, when you came here, we were blowing up a chart, which was simply asking you a question. Just imagine a world where all the NPOs and their stakeholders agree on a single best practice standard for financial reporting. I know you're all here because you're involved in this game and it's something that you love. Well, for some of us, it's a passion that we've been carrying for a while. And now as we've been working in this industry, we have realized that in as much as we do have one common ground and understanding of what reporting standards we need to have, there has been a lot that is not in order. And we're saying, can we continue with that vein? And when our international partners sat down, they decided that no, let us come up with a solution. It's not enough for us to sit in our different pockets and discuss the problems of not having a common standard that is in line. And hence we are here today. Today, the show is here in South Africa. The show will be going to Zambia next. Am I correct, Sam? Or is it Zambia was last week?
Zambia was yesterday, Bangladesh on Saturday.
Bangladesh on Saturday. And you're still all invited to attend, by the way. It's not just about you coming to attend the South African. You're invited to attend each and every one of these. But for today, we just want to focus on you as the South African stakeholder. That is the initiate. But let me just take you through what we want to do for the next few minutes. We're going to do a simple welcome and introduction. There I'll get the opportunity to introduce myself to you and also my host to you, and you get to know a little bit about ourselves. But it's not just about us. We're going also to allow some of you to talk to us in view of the time that we have. We want to know each other, but we really want to also know the status quo of what brings us here today. So we're going to immediately after the introduction talk about the IFR for NPOs. We're going to put a little bit of time there. Samantha's going to take us through that. And then when we've discussed what this is all about, as iron sharpens iron and diamond cuts diamond, we then want to sit down and discuss what is going on, what are we seeing as stakeholders. The most important thing is for you as stakeholders to contribute to what is going on. We don't want you as a stakeholder just to be a practitioner. No, we want you to be part of the whole journey. And in most cases, you do realize that whenever we come up with financial reporting standards, the stakeholders find themselves just at the tail end, simply as users. But now we're creating a platform whereby you are a part of the whole journey. And after that, that's you literally participating in the consultation process. We are going to give you an insight of what that consultation process is all about. And lastly, we give you the next 5 steps. And that is it for today. So first of all, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Edmund Shoko. I am the country champion for this initiative in South Africa. And it is a pleasure to be involved in such an initiative, which I myself have described as one of the kindest things that we can ever do to the profession as far as NPOs are concerned. And I also want to introduce Samantha. She's going to be my co-host or chief host. I don't know, what do you prefer, co or chief?
I think you're the host, Edmund, and I'm your guest.
Look, you're in South Africa. We would really love to accommodate. We're very accommodative people. And we welcome you to South Africa, Samantha. She's currently based in Uganda. Sam is a UK chartered accountant. She qualified with Mazars in 2000, specializes in charity audits. She moved to Uganda in 2001. And of course, she has held various nonprofit sector roles as an auditor, as a chief financial officer, and also grant management advisor. She is a board member and the treasurer for other institutions. And what we have seen most from Samantha is her passion in carrying out training and consultancy assignments all across Africa. Samantha, welcome to South Africa. And having said that, I really want to go. There's really this delayed feedback, isn't it? For a moment there, I thought Kat got your tongue. But look, let's go on. Like I said, we really want to know each other who is in the room. Right now, when I'm looking at my system, it's telling me there's 17 participants. But I would like to recognize Vuyisa. Vuyisa, it's been a while. You're someone that we've been working with in this initiative. Would you like to say hi and just probably give a brief description of who you are, and just let the team know that you're with us today? Can you hear me, Vuyisa?
Yes, I can, Edmund. Okay, maybe let me turn my camera on. Hi, everyone. My name is Vuyiswa Sidzumo. I'm a Senior Program Officer at the Ford Foundation Office for Southern Africa. And yes, as you say, I have been involved in some ways with the project for a while now. Thanks, Edmund. Good to be here.
And it's good to have you, Vuyisa. It's good to have you. I mean, I'm just going to cherry pick on some of you. I'm not going to have all of you. I mean, there's so many of us. I mean, we will get a chance to know each other better when we go on the breakaway sessions. But just to get the meeting started, it's sort of like an icebreaker. I don't know, Nhlanhla Mabaso, would you like to say something? Would you like to say hi? Introduce yourself briefly, just like Vuyisa did.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nhlanhla Mabaso. I'm just interested in this reporting for international fund, for non-profit organization. That's my interest. I'm just I'm not at any NPO. Thank you.
No, you're in the right place, Nhlanhla. You're in the right place because this is a place of passion, hey? This is a place of passion. Everyone here has voluntarily come through. And I mean, when I see these people of passion, I'm already, Sareta Thomas. Would you like to say hi, Sareta? Switch on your video and introduce yourself, and welcome, Nhlanhla. It's good to have you, man.
Thanks, Edmund. Hello, everyone. I'm Sareta. I'm Humentum's Regional Director for Africa, and I'm based in South Africa, in Pretoria. So I'm very excited to be here today and to hear more from you. And coming from Humentum, we're very passionate about this and looking forward what you can bring to the table. Thank you.
Excellent. Welcome, Sareta. Pretoria is such beautiful weather today. It's been raining of late. I love the rains. My garden is looking beautiful. And yeah, welcome once again. Rutendo, would you like to say hi? Would you like to say hi, Rutendo?
Yes, I would love to say hi, Edmund. My name is Rutendo Chandiwana. I'm the grants officer at the Ford Foundation, so one of Vuyisa's colleagues. And at the foundation, I do work on capacity building and institutional strengthening for our grantees. So that is my interest in this session today. So I'm looking forward to learning more and hearing more about the financial reporting. Thanks.
Excellent, Rutendo. Excellent, and welcome. Ford Foundation really coming out strong today. Hey, Sam, really coming out strong. Let's hear from Nigel. Let's hear from Nigel. Nigel Joseph Ndikwere, would you like to say hi to the people today?
Yeah, sure. Hi, guys. My name is Nigel Joseph Ndikwere. I'm originally from Zimbabwe, but I work for PACT in Pretoria. My interest is in the initiative that was brought about, which is going to help immensely in terms of financial reporting for NPOs, because we have been having problems in the field when like issues like recognizing income from donors and when do you recognize and things like that. So I'm much interested in knowing how we can reshape the reporting in NPOs.
Beautiful, very technical guy, Nigel Joseph Ndikwerwe, welcome. Certainly this issue of revenue recognition is a very critical matter, and we do need to find a common ground, eh? We do need to find common ground. One last person to say hi before we go into the next stage of our program today. It goes to lucky, very lucky Frederick Kusambisa. Would you like to say hi, Frederick? He's not feeling that lucky today, is it? Or maybe Hisham is more lucky than him. Hisham, would you like to say hi to me?
Hello.
Go for it, man. Frederick. And both. Okay, you can both say hi, one after another.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Frederick Kusambiza. I work with Planet an NGO based in Johannesburg. And I guess just like everyone has said, we're all interested to learn and know, hear more about things related to reporting to our donor partners and also managing the relationship. Thank you.
Oh, yes. He comes in with a very strategic aspect to it, managing the relationship. Hisham, can you outdo that? Welcome, Fred.
Thank you.
Oh, Hisham, you forgot. We are online. You need to unmute.
Thank you. I think that's the saying for 2020. You're on mute. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Social Change Assistance Trust, and we work with local development agencies in rural communities. And been around for quite some time, and our audits are according to IFRS. And I've also invited our auditor. I'm sure he's somewhere online as well. So I'm just interested in seeing where this is going. Thank you.
It's going far, it's going wide, it's going deep.
Thank you.
No, thank you so much. What's the name of your auditor? If I can just check quickly, I'll give him a chance to, or her a chance to say hi.
Greg Cronier from Solace.
Greg, are you there? Do you recognize your name when it's being called, Mr. Auditor?
One of the Croniers.
All right, they're a little bit shy. No, that's fine, that's perfect. Thank you so much, Hisham. And indeed, I really want this thing to go far, wide, deep, and really all over the world. And welcome once again to today's deliberations and discussions. Folks, we really want them to be deliberations and discussions. So it's not a workshop, we're not training anybody, but we're really wanting to discuss. And having said that, I just want to leave time to Samantha. Sam, would you like to take us to the next stage where you really explain everything about our initiative?
Thank you so much, Edmund, for that lovely introduction. And it's just really, really wonderful to meet a few of you. If you didn't get a chance to introduce yourself, and in any case, please do say hi in the chat function. Tell us your name, your role, your organization, and something about why you're interested in this. It's really, really helpful to get some perspective. So as Edmund, as my host in South Africa, thank you for the warm welcome. As he said, I'm in Uganda. I've been here for 20 years and I'm the project director for this project. So I'm really delighted to tell you a bit about it today. So we're just going to start with a few minutes as a bit of an introduction. For those of you that already know about it, apologies, but it's really important to sort of all get on the same page and so we can have a fruitful conversation. So first of all, I want to show you a really short video. It's also on our website. So here goes. Hopefully this will work. And I have a bit of background noise. I'm really sorry, but if I mute, you won't hear the video. So I hope this will work.
IFR for NPO is a 5-year initiative to develop the first ever internationally applicable financial reporting guidance for non-profit organisations. It's coordinated by Humentum and the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy. You probably know that businesses have international financial reporting standards, and governments have international public sector accounting standards. But the not-for-profit sector has no equivalent. This undermines the consistency and usefulness of financial reports and ultimately harms the sense of trust and accountability that is so central to its effectiveness. The current system is also inefficient, with duplication of effort for both NPO and funders in meeting multiple and at times conflicting financial requirements. An academic study in 2014 received responses from 179 countries. 72% of respondents agreed that an international standard for NPOs would be useful. So, the IFR for NPO project is answering this call. By engaging a wide range of stakeholders, the new guidance will command support from the accounting community and NPOs, as well as those that fund and regulate them. The guidance is being developed in a technically rigorous 3-step process, involving a consultation phase and development of an exposure draft, with final guidance available from early 2025. With the goal that at least 10 countries will use the guidance by 2030, with more to follow. The project has a technical advisory group involving national standard setters from every continent and an official observer from the International Accounting Standards Board. And the practitioner advisory group helps us ensure the guidance will meet users' needs. The founding funders share our vision for this game-changing project. We have the opportunity of a generation. We can increase accountability and transparency while reducing inefficiency in the current system.
There we go. So I hope that's given you, whetted your appetite, let me say, for more to come and given you a kind of sense of what this is really about and what it's trying to do. So one of the really important questions I often get asked is which financial reports is this project dealing with? Obviously, as NPOs, we produce different types of financial reports, and it's really clear for us to know which ones are and which ones are not part of what this guidance is about. So obviously, if we think, all of the transactions of a nonprofit being entered into the accounting system, and then that accounting system classifies and summarizes all those transactions to produce different outputs, different financial reports. So some of those reports will be for internal use by project managers, by senior leadership, by your governing board of trustees. But if you implement donor-funded projects with sort of restricted grant funding, it's likely that you also have to produce donor reports, which is I think what Frederick was alluding to earlier. And they're sort of called special purpose, and they're often specifically for that donor about the project that the donor is funding, sometimes in specific formats, whatever. And then at the end of every year, the entity as a whole has to produce its annual audited accounts, which are often filed with the regulator. They might be published, they might be what you have to send to different people as part of their due diligence checks or to check that you're a bona fide organization. And these are called the general purpose financial statements. And ideally, they should all come out of the same accounting system. So the IFR for NPO project is focusing specifically on these general purpose financial statements and the accompanying narrative reports that tell the story about the impact and all the work that the NPOs do. And I think it's so important when we're talking about financial reporting. You can't really look at the numbers of an NPO separately from what it's actually doing and its impact on the ground. There's no bottom line to look at that's meaningful in the same way as it would be for a business. So because obviously these are interlinked, we can't get away from the fact that the year-end audited accounts come out of the same accounting system as the donor reports. And if you have to structure your accounting system to meet donor reporting requirements, you know, that will have an impact then, won't it, on the way that your accounting system is structured for your year-end accounts as well. So because of that, Humentum is also working on another project. Well, let me not say because of that. This is a major need. It's a major headache for many NPOs, the fact that different donors have different requirements and they're not harmonized and the formats aren't harmonized. So there's 3 projects actually, and if you follow the link in this deck, if you want to find out more about those, there's information about those projects: Money Where It Counts, the Grand Bargain, and the True Cost Project, which are all working with different donors to try and harmonize those as well. That, let me say, is complementary to this initiative. And in some ways, part of the reason that donors each have their own requirements and reporting formats is kind of filling the gap, because there is no internationally recognized professional way to do nonprofit accounting. So they fill the void with their own thing, but they're each different from each other. So those projects, in a way, are looking to this one for guidance, especially on issues like expenditure classification or financial statement presentation, accrual or cash basis, things like that. So there is definitely an interlinkage. So I just want to get that clear from the beginning. This isn't about donor reports specifically, but obviously they're linked and interrelated. So which stakeholders are being considered for this project? So we're actually responding to the challenges as expressed by 3 broad groups of stakeholders. So the first group are the users or the readers of the financial statements. And if we think of general purpose financial statements, they're supposed to be relevant and meaningful for a wide range. So that would include donors who use the general purpose accounts for due diligence. They use it to understand the context of their projects. But it's also regulators or your clients or beneficiaries, maybe your partners that you collaborate with, maybe your grantees want to see who are they partnering with, maybe the public, maybe your banks. There's lots of different people who would use these audited accounts potentially. Now, obviously within that group of users, donors are so influential and important as a group. If their needs aren't met, then they won't be able to align to it or stand behind it, shall we say. And it won't help solve some of the problems in the structure of the sector in terms of financial reporting. So for that reason, we're convening a donor reference group. And I'm delighted to say that Vuyiswa, who's here from the Ford Foundation, was on our practitioner advisory group since last December and is now joining the donor reference group. So we're really looking forward to engaging with donors very importantly in that way. So the second key group of stakeholders are the preparers, the nonprofits themselves, with with their range of resource settings, range of regulatory setups, different sizes, complexities, capacities, the whole gamut. So there's so many different types of organizations, but obviously there's going to be a trade-off, isn't there? Users might want every bit of information that's out there, including the kitchen sink, but maybe for preparers, there's what's practical for them to actually produce as well and meaningful for them. So that they're obviously a very important stakeholder in all this. And then the last group are our auditors. And let me turn my phone, this is my son, sorry. So the last group are auditors and who provide this assurance about whether the financial statements present a true and fair view. And they're often at the front line. I know we have some auditors here, Greg, is it? Often at the front line of supporting their NPO implement and apply applicable accounting standards and guidance. And they see, across a range of different organizations. So they've got really interesting and important perspective to add. So I should mention that as a project, we're not representing any one particular group of stakeholders. Our job is really to make sure that we've heard voices from all over so that we can balance and see where there's a lot of convergence, where are there differences, and how to create something that most people can stand behind. So what are we actually going to deliver? What change are we looking to bring about? I know in non-profits, we like talking about a theory of change. So this is a sort of mini version of our theory of change, if you like. And if we kind of understand the current problems, many of the challenges that are expressed by different stakeholders stem from this core problem that there isn't an internationally applicable standard. So where countries don't have their own national standard, which I believe is the case for South Africa, there isn't a South Africa accounting standard specifically for non-profits. That means that you can get inconsistency between NPOs in the same jurisdiction, which can be complicated for regulators or the public to understand what's happening. Then for larger international NPOs, if you've got, offices in different countries and then you've got to consolidate them, if they're very different from each other, that can also make everything very expensive and complicated. Crucially, when funders look at these audited, they've told us that they find it hard to make sense of them. Usually the people in funder organizations who are reviewing them are desk officers or grant officers. They're not qualified accountants in the main. But they're trying to access information in the financial statements to help them with due diligence, to help them understand this potential partner. So they find it hard to access that information. So what we end up with is expensive and often duplicative processes for financial reporting, for due diligence, and for auditing. Just trying to silence my phone. There we go. And that lack of clarity and consistency ultimately reduces the transparency in the sector, doesn't it? Which we all want. Well, we mostly want. I was in a meeting in one country recently where they were talking about, for some NPOs, if they're challenging their government, which some advocacy organizations are doing, that's a slightly different situation where maybe they want to be as under the radar as possible. But generally speaking, to the sector as a whole, transparency and trust go hand in hand, and it helps build, for funds to flow in the sector. So one of the things that funders are nervous about is often double funding fraud, where the one NPO could report the same expenditure to two different donors. And that kind of fraud is actually really hard to spot at the moment because of all this focus on the project-based reporting without being very strongly reconciled and woven together into the annual reporting. So those are just some of the challenges that we're seeing. And the solution, I wouldn't say it's a magic bullet solution, but a really big part of laying the foundation for solving some of these problems at a sector-wide level is this guidance. So what we're providing as a project is internationally applicable guidance for how NPOs should prepare their annual general purpose financial reports. So it would be up to a particular country to decide whether to adopt or align to it, just like IFRS is now. So South Africa has obviously chosen that entities within South Africa may use IFRS. But there are other countries that don't. So it's up to a country to decide and make that decision for entities within its jurisdiction. And they could decide to require it or allow it. And it could be for some types of entities, but not others. So that kind of adoption or allowing decision is country-based. And then funders who might be in other countries can also play a really important role in recognizing it as best practice, encouraging its use where entities are allowed to adopt it. And in some countries where there really isn't strong or meaningful regulation, that level of, should we say, endorsement by donors is going to be a really big driver for compliance. So the future outcomes and benefits that we hope to see are really wide-ranging. So for NPOs that apply the guidance themselves, it means they should be better able to demonstrate their capacity and attract funds, as well as supporting the provision of really useful information for making decisions internally, for governance and for management. For funders, it contributes to better and more efficient due diligence And that's a win for NPOs as well. If we can have less duplication and effort in the due diligence process but achieve the same results, that'd be fantastic. And then having clear guidance simplifies and improves the value of audit assurance as well. We have hopefully fewer qualifications just on the basis of accounting policy, which is really confusing for readers when they see a qualification, but it's not that something's really wrong. It's just that the accounting policy that works for this organization isn't in compliance with IFRS, for example. So we just get a stronger environment for auditors to do their job really well. Then one of the other really important outcomes from this project, which is kind of separate from the guidance itself, if you like, is the creation of a global community of stakeholders who are able to engage and collaborate to solve sector-wide issues around this topic. And this has never really existed before, and I think that's part of the reason why this problem has no one's really tried to solve this problem before, because there's too many stakeholders and they're too different and it's too hard to convene. So ultimately, we believe that this guidance will contribute to a more resilient and accountable sector. It's better able to attract and utilize funds and ultimately better able to achieve all the positive good that it does in society. So that's what we hope, our big picture of the good for NPOs, good for funders, good for auditors, good for regulators. We really hope and believe a win-win. There shouldn't be losers in this project. The only losers at the moment are organizations at the mercy of swimming in a sea of lack of clear guidance and the inefficiency that produces. So who's behind it? The project's been implemented by 2 organizations in partnership. So Humentum, which is who I work for, and my colleague Sarita Thomas, is a global nonprofit that advocates for data-driven policies that make humanitarian development sector more equitable, accountable, and resilient. So we do have advocacy, influencing and thought leadership activities, but we also have really practical services like training and consultancy to support areas of finance, financial management, project management, HR, and the like. So if you would like any support from Humentum in any way, do contact Sarita, and she's there in South Africa for you. Then CIPFA, the Chartered Institute of Public Finance and Accountancy, is a UK-based professional accountancy organisation, the only one that is focused exclusively on the public sector. So they have, in the UK, they have important standard setting roles for local government and charities. But they also play a really important role as an international convener on public sector accounting issues. And important to say, both Humentum and CIPFA are themselves, we are both non-profits ourselves. So between us, we have well connected, should I say, to a range of stakeholders within the sector that are really critical to this project. So it really is a by the sector, for the sector. That's not being inflicted on the sector by anyone. It's being developed from within the sector and with hopefully input from stakeholders all over. Seed funding has been provided by the Open Society Foundations and the Ford Foundation. Thank you so much. They've had the real vision to step out and fund something that's a bit sideways from, there's no funder that has this at the top of their agenda, right? There's no funder that says this is the main thing we should be doing. It's a really sideways project, but so important to improve the sort of infrastructure in which the whole sector operates. So thank you to those brave and bold funders. Now, the project team itself is really tiny, but we are multiplied by some advisory groups who offer their perspectives and expertise on a voluntary basis. And we have some here with us today. So the technical advisory group comprises national accounting standard setters from 5 continents. And you can see here at the bottom left is Lebogang Sene. And I think, Lebo, are you here today? Do you want to quickly say hello? If you're with us.
Hi, Sam, I am here. Just can't come on video at the moment.
That's fine. Super. So sorry, and is on technical director for PAFA and representing Africa in a sense on the technical advisory group. Although we do also have a member from Sierra Leone at the bottom right and from Rwanda representing East Africa at the top right. And to be honest, I think Africa is not the best best represented in many of these international accounting development processes. Same with Asia and Latin America. And we want to make really sure that as a project, we give a voice and we give space to hear from stakeholders who will be affected by the guidance. So we want to make sure that they have a say in how it's developed. Then the practitioner advisory group, you can see on the right, it's a slightly old photo because Vuyiswa is there in the middle, but she's now left and joined the donor reference group. The practitioner advisory group is a mixture of so funders, non-profits, auditors, academics from, again, all over the world. We have an advisor from USAID, we have BDO and CRO, very many reputable and respected organizations from around the world, which is super. So they do a wonderful job. So we've had a look at sort of what the projects, why the project's needed, how it's going to make a change and who's involved. But let's have a quick look at the sort of the process and the timeline. So we're actually using a three-phase process that's equivalent to all other accounting standard setting processes. So phase one is the consultation phase, and the key output from that is a consultation paper, which will be launched on the 28th of January next year. And what that paper does is it presents some structured arguments and questions so that we can get input from stakeholders. And I'll talk to you more about that after we've had our small group discussions and give you a bit more detail on the kinds of questions that we'll be asking you. Then the second phase is this development phase where we analyze the feedback from that consultation and then use that as an evidence base to draft the guidance itself. And that guidance is then exposed for comment. So it's called an exposure draft. And we're looking at that by mid-2023. This could be a lot quicker if we just had two guys in a room doing it by themselves, but then it wouldn't be inclusive. So what takes the time is the inclusiveness and making sure we hear from stakeholders all over the world. So it's a long time to wait, but we hope it will be worth it. Then the third phase, we take stock of the feedback from that exposure draft, put through changes before launching the final guidance, which is expected in early 2025. I should say really, I mean, the guidance is what this project is all about, but that is the beginning, not the end, because all these benefits that we've talked about really only accrue, if I can use that word, or they really only come to us when the guidance has been widely adopted and is used. That's when we actually see the standardization, the benefits of standardization and harmonization. And for that reason, there are two key sort of aspects to the project design. One is the technical rigor that's applied to the guidance development process, which is led by CITFA with their technical expertise and all the input from the technical advisory group, who are absolutely the world's best standard setters for non. And then the other aspect is this stakeholder engagement piece, which is led by Humentum. So we're actively reaching out to stakeholders all over the world. That's regulators, national professional accountancy organizations, donors, and nonprofits to participate in the development process. And that's why we have wonderful country champions like Edmund, because we're a tiny team and we can't be everywhere. So we need country champions and other advocates who will help us get the word out there and get that input and feedback from this huge stakeholder group. So how are we doing in terms of engagement? So this, as at the end of October, it's gone up, all the numbers have gone up since then. We've had interest from 94 countries. The ones in blue, the countries in blue there are where at least one person, hopefully more, has expressed an interest and has signed up to the newsletter or the forum. And we've got some people to engage with. Then the yellow flags are the TAG members, the technical advisory group, and the maroon are the PAG members. So again, you can see quite a shift, quite a spread. You can also probably notice we are very thin on PAG members in Latin America, and we're working hard to improve that. And then and the black flags are the wonderful champions, which is really exciting. So we are just wanting to make sure that we hear from voices from all over the world. So having heard that brief introduction, now's a chance really to meet some of the other people here, share your questions and thoughts in small groups. So I'm going to set you up into some breakout rooms. If you've probably used this in Zoom by now, 2020 being what it has been. And so you'll get into a small group with maybe, I don't know how many, 7 to 9 people. So just say hi to each other, get to know each other a bit, and just share what are your reactions, your comments, or your questions just from what you've heard so far. And then it'd be good to think through from your perspective, what can you see as the benefits from your point of view, and how could it make your life better? And then what challenges do you foresee that it'd be really good to feed back to us as a project and to bear in mind? And if you have solutions to those challenges, all the better. So I'm going to set up the breakout rooms. I'll make three rooms. Great. So I'm going to send you off and enjoy your chat. If you can share, put your video on, it does make for a nicer conversation. Are there any questions before we go? We're good. Okay, so I'll give you 20 minutes or so. In maybe a little bit longer, maybe 25. If you need to come back for any reason, you can just come back to the main room. Otherwise, enjoy. Bye. Great, so welcome back. Welcome back from those small groups. I hope you had a nice chat. It's a bit weird, isn't it? You suddenly get yanked out, and I'm sure half of you were mid-conversation, so sorry about that. But it'd be great to hear some of your reflections and thoughts. So if anyone wants to unmute themselves or put your hand up, hopefully you can unmute yourself if you want to, and then fire away, share a question or a reaction or a comment. Who wants to go first?
Excellent. I mean, thank you so much, Sam. I mean, in our group, we decided to have a spokesperson. The gentlemen were somehow shy to raise their hands, and we left it to our ladies. And our lady, Mampolo, please, can you share some of the deliberations that we had? And thank you so much for being so brave and showing these men how it's done. Mampolo, go for it, man.
Start with the reactions and comments and questions, and then we'll move on later to benefits and challenges. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. In my group, we have spoken quite a lot on the benefits, and we have said that we feel confident that if the standard is developed for NGOs, including the CPOs, the template that will be simple and straightforward for everybody to use. And the terminology also, we have also picked up on the terminology, that the terminology on the templates must be of the NGOs. We must speak about the grants, we must speak about project. When we look at the standard template or the standard that we're using now, they are for profit making, which they speak about profit, and in NGOs we do not make profit. We are not a profit making organization. So basically we looking for something that will be standardized and easier to use by the NGOs. And that it should also, we also had consent that the current templates that we are using, they actually do not accommodate the CBOs because of the requirements. So they're basically kicking out the CPOs on the system. So I think that's most of the thing that we emphasized on. And we also we have also highlighted that the templates must not be complex. They must be just be simple for everybody. And yeah, I think that's what we've picked up on. And the other concern was that if this will go down the road like IRFs, so we just need to make sure that we get this thing done and make sure that all the NGOs are standardized and using the templates. I will leave it to my group to add if I have left something. Thank you.
Thank you, Mamfolo. Is there anyone else from that group who'd like to add anything in terms of benefits or other kinds of reactions or comments? Complexity makes it a costly exercise, Hisham is saying. So complexity of the project makes the project costly, or the complexity of the financial reporting makes it costly? The cost versus benefit.
I'd just like to step in and just perhaps expand on some of the points that we discussed in our breakaway. It was obviously a lot of positive in terms, I think undoubtedly there's definitely a need for separate reporting for non-profit organizations. We've engaged on a number of occasions with the South African Institute of Chartered Accountants, to try and see how to go about obviously achieving this. So, hats off to the role players that have finally, to obviously initiated this. But at the same time, I think what we were also saying is that we need to ensure that we don't go down the route of IFRS in its current state. The reason why I say that is that, having been someone who studied, through the early years of where the statement started expanding, from the simplified income and expenditure, assets, liabilities, and to where it is right now, it's become so complex that compliance does become costly. And I think what complexity also does is that it's taken something that should have been quite simple, and it's complicated it to such a degree that it now opens it up for manipulation and interpretation. And I don't think we want to see that obviously happening in the non-profit sector, like we've seen with the global scandals. I wouldn't even limit it to South Africa, and it generally happens because of it becoming so complex. A simple matter, but it gets so complicated, and you have to get in so many different opinions, and everybody has their own interpretation of it. So I think that's one of the things to come out of it.
Brilliant, thanks for sharing that, Reza. And I think this is something we're hearing loud and clear. It needs to be simple enough. We need to, if it gets too complicated, it's going to be counterproductive, and it won't serve all the hopes that we have for it. I'll come to this a bit later in the next part of the presentation, but for that very reason, the proposal that we're putting forward in the consultation paper is to use IFRS for SMEs, for small and medium entities, as the sort of founding, starting international standard, and we plug the gaps in that where we have gaps for non-profit organizations, but using that as a starting point, because it's this big rather than this big, and yeah, easier for smaller and medium-sized organizations to manage. Apollo, you were talking about CBOs, and I think this is going to be really important, and again, in part of the consultation paper. The needs of a tiny community-based organization with 3 people under a mango tree are going to be very, very different from even a medium-sized international NGO with maybe 500 staff. And having one guidance that can fit literally everybody is very, very difficult. So we've had a lot of debates, and Lebo and Vuiswa will stand with this one, a lot of conversation about who should we pitch it to initially, because it's impossible to get something that will please everybody. So there's a proposal for that, but the idea is not to try and meet the needs of the very, very, very smallest, who are much more likely to be on a cash basis reporting and have much more simple needs, and also not to cater it entirely to the huge, massive, the needs of a Red Cross or something as our sort of target, because the bulk of the organizations that would really benefit from this are at the smaller and medium end of the scale. So that is certainly the intention, that it should be simple enough for that kind of user group. But getting that will be not easy. And I think this is why it'd be so important to get your feedback, input, because there'll be people that want to up the level of complexity, and there'll be people who want it reduced. So there's no one right answer. And the only way to really feel that will be getting the feedback that we're requesting from the consultation process. So that's my little plug for making sure your voice is heard, so you get the right level that you want. Thank you so much to that group. That's really helpful, really interesting. Is there another group that'd like to share their reactions, the benefits, questions?
Hi, so maybe I can jump in for our group, and then hopefully we can plug the gaps. Rutendo, thank you for your contributions. I think the pursuit of standards specific to non-profits is a noble pursuit, and it's great that there'd be a set of standards so that when it comes to reporting, we're not playing second fiddle to for-profit entities and just using the standards that are applicable to them. And it was nice to hear that your thinking isn't to reinvent that full set of standards, but to work off that IFRS for SMEs and then adapt, so you're not kind of having to do all that groundwork too. Perhaps there's also areas that might benefit from simplification, even from the IFRS for SME standards. I'm just thinking of lease smoothing, and most of the time we look past those adjustments to try and look, as a funder, so I think I might have been framed as an auditor. I'm actually from a private funding foundation. I'm Greg van der Walt, not Greg Cronje. So sorry. It's one of the few meetings when auditor would have been welcomed and treated like a celebrity. I'm sorry, I'm not that person today. So I think we often want to get back to a cash lens. So we often unwinding a lot of accounting adjustments. That said, obviously, I think one of the contentious areas you probably are facing is around the differences between surpluses and liabilities, recognizing deferred incomes, what commitments actually exist in the future tied to that grant income, for example, and what can actually be recognized now, and reaching consensus around that treatment globally, I can imagine as one of the challenges up ahead or that you're currently facing. And we talked a bit about some of the bilaterals perhaps having a very loud voice because they're obviously big funding flows, but there's a lot of other private foundations that are more flexible, a lot of NGOs that obviously want to disclose information that they feel is most relevant. So it's about balancing all those voices and balancing them across the global north, south, east, west. I can see those challenges up ahead for you. So I think that was actually when you said it's going to start off with IFRS for SMEs, I think there's a lot of work that's then been done for you. But but yeah, congratulations. I'm really glad you are doing this, and I'm glad there's support behind it. And one of the big things will be the buy-in of bodies like SAICA, won't it? And getting those bodies that have standing with the country, is, for example, the Companies Act in South Africa. You need a body that the Companies Act, when they say it must be generally accepted accounting practice, they're going to look to SAICA and say, what is generally accepted accounting practice for the NGO? So having buy-in from a body like that with this process is going to be absolutely critical for it to take, to get momentum here in South Africa and start getting adopted and start getting audited against. So yeah, interested to hear how that's going.
Thank you, Greg, the non-auditor who can speak auditor speak. Really, really interesting comments. And I think this issue of power and the loudness of voices is certainly sort of at the heart of Humentum's reason for being, and wanting to make sure that there's a more level playing field globally in terms of the global power dynamics, but absolutely engaging the bilaterals. Working with Ford Foundation, as we've seen, they're much more flexible. There's much less in the way of requirements and things, boxes to tick and prescriptions. And I think it'll be really interesting to see on the donor reference group having a range of different donors to influence each other as well and listen to each other. And also, obviously, with foundations, they haven't got the same level of back donor taxpayers' money and governments breathing down their neck that some of the government donors have. And so there's there's some really complex dynamics there. And you mentioned about income. Right. Absolutely, that's going to be one of the topics that I'll talk about a bit later, whether to defer it or recognize it and all those sorts of things. And the last thing you mentioned, I'll let you come back in. IFRS for SME are currently undergoing a review, and they were considering whether to incorporate IFRS 16, which is the lease smoothing standard, into the IFRS for SME. So I contributed to that consultation process and said, no, please don't, keep it out, keep it simple. But we'll have to see how that IFRS for SME standard moves. But certainly our aim would be absolutely to get the level of assets and liabilities that's meaningful and useful without excessive, very objective adjustments that seem to have be less close to our reality. So Greg, you had another comment. Please do comment.
Okay.
Back in.
Yeah, that'll be great if you manage to keep it out. I was under the impression it was on its way in. So that's good to hear. Yeah, I think we've often argued for donors when we fund in collaboration with other donors, which is our preference. We've argued for us all accepting the same report and tried to find consensus on what that needs to include, so that the implementing partners we're working with can then standardize the reports and provide that to all of us. And when we've kind of come in at the same time and developed it together, that's been possible. But you know, I don't want to blow our own horn. We tried this with USAID at time. Apologies if anyone on the call is with USAID. We tried it. I think at a structuring level, we were able to collaborate, but when it came to reporting, it just moved so far apart. So I think at a grant specific reporting level, we're going to have some major challenges there. But if we all as privates and other bilaterals and other multilaterals can reach consensus on what's appropriate, at least that body of work that needs to be done by each NGO can diminish to just kind of one or two sets, like US GAAP and IFRS instead of US GAAP and every single other donor's RS.
Absolutely. So there was just one for donors and one for our year-end accounts. That would be much easier than 1 million for donors and 1 million for our year-end accounts, which makes everything impossible. I should say that USAID are acting as advisors to the project on the practitioner advisory group. So they know about it, they're engaged, and they even mentioned it in their annual report that was published recently, which was really exciting for me, that it was considered enough of an item. This project is important enough to them that they mentioned it. That's not to say that, you know, in a week's time they're going to ditch everything they've got and take the new guidance. It's much more complicated than that, but they're engaging, they're advising, they're working, and then working with us. So we hope that as more and more donors come on board, gradually we can shift, but it's certainly not going to be straightforward. Okay, thank you. Bye-bye. Oh, thank you.
That's good. Thanks.
Great. Thank you so much for that. Those comments, Greg. Really, really helpful. Really interesting. What about the third group? Is there another group that wanted to share some of their thoughts? Who's in the third group? Did you nominate a spokesperson who's feeling shy? You can just unmute and come in.
I have a feeling that was my group, Sam. We didn't really nominate a spokesperson, but I think from, you know, the feedback that we got, definitely there's excitement. I know two people kind of mentioned the revenue recognition as being a huge issue for them, so they're looking forward to that. I don't know if I can put them on the spot. Belinda had quite a lot to say. Is there anything else that you'd like to share with the group, perhaps? Okay, perhaps not.
Sorry, hi. Hi.
Sorry, Belinda, to put you on. I just thought you had very valuable feedback.
I'm super excited about this. I joined a nonprofit organization 20 years ago as a newly qualified chartered accountant. And I looked around desperately for something to use, to understand, because the account that I had in front of us, that I had in front of me, I didn't understand and nobody else could understand. And when I tried to get the auditors to audit it, it was a disaster. So I think it's a really, really great idea. In the 20 years that I've been reporting to and doing projects with different donors, USAID, the EU, government, you all understand that it is reporting completely differently. We speak different jargon. The NPOs, we have our own jargon, and it would be so nice if we could streamline what we're all talking about and have something which we're all using. So I think it is an absolutely great idea. And I really am going to be keeping my eye on it. Revenue recognition using IFRS has been a big problem in my organization. We run over 50 projects at a time, from very small to very large, and then having to do a set of financial statements to be audited at the end of the day. I can understand how funders look at that and have absolutely no idea. It doesn't speak to any of their projects because it's all been amalgamated. They just see work in progress as an asset, funder advance the liability, and they've got no idea where they fit into it. And then, as you've all said, we're reporting completely differently to everybody else. Another big problem for us is how to report overheads, because one donor will only accept a personnel cost, where another one with an indirect cost benefits, and then another donor will accept a marked up rate so that we get overheads. Then we have others that want co-funding, and then again, you don't want to be double dipping, so you have to have a system where you're showing them, well, the co-funding is from here or the co-funding is from there. So I think it's an absolutely fantastic initiative, and I'd love to be involved. And I think what the previous person was saying about getting SACA on board, I think is very, very important as well.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Belinda. Fantastic comments. Thank you for enthusiasm. And I can hear you also really understand some of these challenges. And if donors can't see their own project or their own balances in the year-end audits, that's why we get all this duplication. I can't see anything relevant for me in these. So we get the same transactions audited again and again by different auditors, which is just so inefficient. So yeah, really looking forward to simplifying that. Great. I wonder if and I'm hearing you on the language as well, this language that can be common, which was also mentioned by Mapolo, which would be so beneficial, wouldn't it? Not just within one country or within one donor, but even just internationally would simplify everything. So I wonder if now's a good time to move on to the next part of the presentation, because there's lots of items that you've been talking about that are covered there, and then we will have more time for questions after that as well if we need it. So let me share. I hope this is the, oh no, that's not right at all. Let me go back here. Share my screen again. So what we're going to talk about now is the consultation process. Yes, hopefully this will do it. Now, can you see? Can you see the screen that says the consultation process? And you can't see all my notes. Hopefully, if you can, somebody can give me a thumbs up.
We can see your notes, Sam. We can see your notes.
Thank you, Edmund. Sorry. Right, let's try that. Okay, here we go. So having heard those brilliant voices from you, I thought we'd just move on to this next stage where we're going to look at the consultation process. So who should participate? What does the consultation paper look like? And how practically do we actually just get involved? So who, obviously, literally everybody in the sector, any user, preparer or auditor, but we're really quite interested to hear the feedback from regulators, which might be, obviously NPO is very broad. There might be different types of NPOs. Some may be regulated by an NGO board, others might be regulated by education, or there might be different regulators within the same government, depending on the type of NPO. But they're really key, because if they don't like what comes, then they won't apply it in their country. So it's really important to hear those voices. Then auditors, funders and NPOs are the key groups that we've been talking about. But I don't want to leave out beneficiaries. If there's civil society that has a view, really, really important to make sure their needs are met. So why? Without hearing from stakeholders in South Africa, the cultural, the legal, the regulatory context won't be reflected. Often, as I said, these things get done without the budget or the project designed to have wide consultation, and we really make that different, so that stakeholders all over the world we can't meet everybody's needs, but at least they're understood and balanced, and we can have a shot. It's to shape the future. So you're saying you want something simple, you want to make sure it doesn't go down this direction or that direction. Well, if you get involved and share your voice, you can be part of shaping. You can, future generations could look back and say, thank you for building us something that actually works, rather than something that makes it worse. And also just building credibility, not only for the sector, but for the project. So if we get feedback, building the credibility of the guidance, I should say. So if we get feedback from, 1,000 people in 150 countries, that gives us a really strong evidence base. And then it becomes harder and harder for donors or regulators or others to discount it as really relevant, applicable and thorough. So really important to have both quality of responses and also quantity. So the consultation process is being shaped by a document called a consultation paper. It's really in its very final stages right now, but it's about 200 pages plus. So it's really important to understand how it's structured, so you can access the bits that you want. So after the executive summary, there's an introduction, which sets out the objectives of the project and explains who should respond and how, and that's just really short, essential reading. Then the bulk of the paper and all the questions that we'll be looking for feedback on are in these two sections, part 1 and part 2, and we'll just look at those in a bit more depth in a minute. So then there's some supplementary information provided. So there's a lot of technical research has been done. There are annexes showing, for example, on grant income, well, how does New Zealand treat it? How does the UK treat it? All these different countries that are part of the technical advisory group. How does IPSAS treat it? So you can get this comparative, and we don't want to reinvent the wheel. We want to make ourselves a bespoke thing that's really going to work well for us. So there's lots of supplementary information there. And then this glossary. Now, just to be clear here, the glossary isn't now going to become like these are the new terms that the world should use. This is really that because there is such a diversity of terms and some words mean different things in different places. Think of designated and restricted and surplus and all sorts of things. So in the glossary, it just defines how we've used, what we've meant when we've used the term, just to avoid some of that misunderstanding by potentially different meanings. So the kind of feedback that we'll be looking for, the kind of questions, let's have a look at that. So part one is about framework level issues, if you like, landscape level issues, like how to describe nonprofits and who are the stakeholders that are important. So it's written in plain English and it's pitched to be accessible to a broad audience of stakeholders interested in financial reporting, not limited to accountants. Each chapter presents a proposal and ends with a request for general matters for comment. That's kind of what they call the questions. So in other words, you're invited to comment on the general level matters presented in the chapter. And they kind of take this form. Do you agree with the proposal that we've set out? If not, why not? So in that sense, you kind of need to read it before you answer the question. And there's a level of structure to the questions and the answers, which enables us to analyze. But there's also, you know, an open, you can share all the richness of your views. There's an openness to the way you can respond as well. So then part two is about these specific accounting issues, like when to recognize grant income or disclose gifts in kind or things like that. It's also written in plain English, but it is pitched to be accessible to a more technical audience, familiar with accounting concepts and language. So in here, each section, I think, well, actually there are 10 issues covered in 5 sections. So for each of the issues, it describes what the issue is and then presents alternative treatments. And then each section ends with a kind of request for specific matters for comment. So what are your comments on the specific matters in this, relating to this issue? And these ones really take the form similar. Do you agree with the way we've described this issue? Do you agree that the right alternatives are presented here? If not, why not? And then which, if you had a choice out of these alternatives, which one would you choose? Which would be your preferred option? So again, it's really necessary to have read the section and the chapter before you can answer the question. And what this does is it gives the project really rich feedback. Because obviously when you answer, you'll also give a small amount of demographic information, which country, which stakeholder type. Are you a massive non-profit or are you a donor or whatever, so that we can get some context for the answers, which, as you can imagine, will be really important. So let's take a deeper dive into these general level issues in part one. I should mention that the questions here, it's not entirely, until it's published, I can't say it's final. So these are to give a sort of flavour and a taster. But if it does end up being slightly different on the day, please don't be too upset, but this should give you a flavour. So chapter 1 is all about which organisations could be called non-profit organisations for the purposes of this guidance. So is it just NGOs? What about a social enterprise? What about a political party or a non-profit university? What is it that makes something non-profit? What if a non-profit has income generating activities, etc.? So what might look like quite a simple question actually gets quite complicated at the edges. So we've presented in the chapter, we've presented some broad characteristics that, you know, if an entity displays these broad characteristics, then this guidance is likely to be relevant for them. So the question is, do you agree with these broad characteristics? Is this the right way to describe what makes an NPO an NPO? If not, why not? And what characteristics would you propose? Thank you, Reza. Thanks for letting us know. I appreciate that. Then chapter 2 is really about the users or the external stakeholders to the organization, the users of the financial reports. Who are they and what are their information needs? It's obviously so different from an investor who's thinking about buying shares and looking at return investment. It's obviously not that, but what is it? Who are they and what exactly are they looking for? So the proposal is around, for example, that they need information on the NPO's achievement of objectives, which is not necessarily, well, not necessarily financial, economy and efficiency, compliance with restrictions and regulations, and then longer term financial health. And it's explained in the chapter. So then the question is, do you agree? Are these the right things? Are there different things that users are looking for? What would you propose and why? Then chapter 3, or 5, I should say there are 5 chapters. So the third chapter is about aspects of the guidance itself. So we are proposing, and we set out the reasons for why we think it should be accrual-based guidance rather than cash-based guidance, which has not been an easy journey at all, especially as there's quite a high propensity for some of the bigger donors to require cash basis reporting. So it's all laid out there in chapter. I won't explain it now, we'll go through it now, but we have landed on accrual-based guidance as being the most appropriate for the objectives of the project. But we really want to hear from stakeholders. What challenges do you foresee with that? How can we mitigate those? What else might we do instead if you don't like that? And then the other aspect in chapter 3 is relating to narrative reporting. Should narrative reporting be part of the scope of this guidance, which we firmly believe it should. We've had a very strong steer from the PAG, from the Practitioner Advisory Group, that would be appropriate. But again, what do stakeholders think? So then chapter 4 is basically, first it makes the argument that we can't start with a completely blank piece of paper. We do, for what Belinda was mentioning, how you can be a qualified chartered accountant and you come into a non-profit and you can't make sense of what you're reading. And quite often there isn't this connection with the rest of the professionalism in the sector. And just from a time point of view, we can't start with a completely blank sheet. And many of the things that are in IFRS or IFRS for SMEs is relevant. If you have a normal everyday transaction or a normal everyday asset or liability, there's guidance there and it's not necessarily not relevant. It's more that there's a lack of guidance for some sector specific issues. So what we've done here is say, okay, the 3 international standards are IFRS, IPSAS and IFRS for SME. And none of them is absolutely ideal as a starting point, but we don't have, I think probably the best if we had it would be a kind of IPSAS for SMEs kind of type international standard, but that doesn't exist. So we've selected these criteria for assessing which of the existing frameworks would be the most appropriate starting point. And then asking for feedback. Are these the right criteria? Do you agree with the way we've done the scoring and the assessment? And then chapter 5, which is kind of where it's all going. I've given it away before this part of the presentation. But the model that we're proposing is to start with IFRS for SME for all the reasons that are laid out. But then to draw on, to fill the gaps, to draw on other guidance, other international guidance and other national guidance as needed. So we're not generally going to be making anything up from scratch because there are about 20 countries that have their own non-profit standards. Well, we want to draw on that expertise, pick the best of that's going to work as an international standard that everybody can align towards. So the question is, do you agree with that model? What alternative would you suggest? Do you have concerns about IFRS for SME as a foundation? And hearing Greg's comment there about smoothing of leases and things like that. If IFRS for SME starts getting too complicated, that would be a challenge, and that would be a really important thing to mention there. And I think that feedback would even go back to IASB, who are official observers on the technical advisory group. And I think that would be really interesting for shaping that standard as well. So that's it for part 1, gives you a flavour of the kinds of topics and questions. Then part 2, which is more technical in nature. So questions like income recognition, you can see at the bottom here. Do we accrue it when it's coming? Do we recognise it when we've got it? Do we defer it until we've spent it? How do we, this language about conditions and restrictions and stipulations, what do they mean and what are the implications for those in terms of recognising liabilities? All of that. So that's going to be a really meaty one, and there are strong people, the people who really hold to what they've been doing for various reasons, and so that's going to be one of the hardest ones I think to solve. But also this area of in-kind, services in kind, donations in kind, Let's get something that's meaningful, because it's common in the sector where it isn't really in the corporate sector, and yet you don't want to end up with lots and lots of subjective, onerous disclosures that might then increase your tax liability, or there could be knock-on impacts. It'd be really interesting to hear from people what they think would be most appropriate. This one about how to classify expenses, I think, is going to really be important for feeding into any harmonization of donor reports as well. If we look at company accounts, the P&L is one page and it's always got the same structure. Not so for non-profits. Can we align behind some agreed headings, which would give us some structure to our charts of accounts, and even to donors' charts of accounts? That would be helpful. And should it be by nature or function? I think this is also going to be a really interesting, knotty area. The question of financial statement presentation. Should we have, an income statement that has columns for restricted versus unrestricted, so we can measure things about, complying with restrictions? Do we want to have vertical or horizontal balance sheets? All sorts of questions around that. Things here we've got like assets. So if you have assets in IFRS, an asset is impaired if it doesn't generate revenue, if you can't show that it's going to generate revenue. Well, our assets don't generate revenue, and they're not supposed to. They're there to achieve a social benefit. So how do we handle issues of asset impairment? Or inventory that should be valued at the lower of cost and net realizable value, but it doesn't have a realizable value. We're not going to sell it, we're going to distribute it or use it. So just bringing some of those things, which are fairly everyday, but how do we bring that into our context so that it makes sense? Then some important areas around who is the reporting entity actually, and when we've got levels of control, how do we define the level of control? Am I implementing this project for myself as an organization, or am I just an agent of a donor that really is telling me what to do? How do we define that level of control, or this sort of question of control? What if we've got joint ventures and partnership where the entity is one part of it, so like CIPFA and Humentum? Is it appropriate for one to bring the transactions of the other into its books and things like that? Really relevant, but pretty knotty. And obviously, these questions are really hard. There's no obvious answer. There's no one right answer either. And I think that's why countries where there isn't a national standard, why you get so much variation. We have to make up these answers on a case-by-case basis. So the questions again, so have we explained this issue well? Does it resonate? Are the alternatives the right ones? Which one would you prefer? There's also a question like, are these the right issues? What about, I don't know, foreign exchange? Is that a burning issue in the sector that's got sector-specific issues that aren't covered in IFRS for SME? Are there other issues that are really high priority? And there's an opportunity to mention that in the consultation paper as well, in your responses. So hopefully by now you're feeling that, yes, you would like to share your opinions, you'd like to shape the future of this guidance and make sure it really reflects your needs as much as possible. So the only question then is how? So the paper will be launched on the 28th of January. If you registered for this event, you should get some sort of email notification, and hopefully you'll see it on social media and what have you. And we're trying to make it as easy as possible to respond. So it's under discussion at the moment exactly how that will be. But we're looking at, a sort of template Word document if you want to discuss with others and answer on behalf of an organization or a group, or there'll be a simple, SurveyMonkey type survey for individuals. You don't have to respond to all of it. If you're interested in part 1, but not in part 2, fine. If there's one chapter that you've got strong opinions on, or one section, that's fine. So you've got a chance to share your voice without it being too onerous. The main sort of source of everything will be the website. That's where you can get all the information, IFR for NPO. It's taken me about a year to learn to say that, ifr4npo.org website. And then the window for responses will be 30th of July for part 1 and 24th of September for part 2. And we're also looking to, and again, this is not official, I'm sort of sharing our proposed plans at the moment to have some regional level virtual roundtables in March to May, probably sort of 4 hours, and probably with an invited guest list of around 60 to get some of the most significant or representative, I should say, stakeholders around the table to not discuss everything, it's too long, but pick out four or so key questions to discuss and give it a really rich conversation. There's also the online forum. That won't give us official responses, but it's a good place to sort of talk about them and discuss and share ideas. We will also be doing webinars, especially on some of those more technical issues in part 2, and there'll be video explainers to go alongside each of the chapters and each of the sections in part 2 as well. So it's a bit easier to access than the full document. But the full document is the real thing. That's the actual thing to read. And then the videos are just there to help lift it off the page, if you like, and help make it easier to engage with. So I think I'll end there. The one thing I want you to go away with, the single biggest message is please, please, please take this opportunity. We've worked really hard to make sure that everybody has a voice. So please use it to shape the future of non-profit financial reporting. Great. So I think we've got time for questions, and then a couple of slides to finish with, and just how you can stay engaged with the project. So are there questions or comments? What other, has this met some of the hopes you were hoping for? Are there, what came to mind as you were listening to that, and are there any other questions? Please fire away. Or you can put them in the chat if you're feeling shy, that's also fine. Lebo, from PAFA point of view and as a tag member, is there anything that, any reflections you want to add?
I think you've kind of covered everything. I just want to also just echo your sentiments that, you know, we are looking for input. We don't always know what we don't know. So for those that, you know, if there is something that we've missed out that you feel is absolutely critical, please do raise your hand and let us know. Thanks, Sam.
Brilliant, thank you. So let me just move on to the, I can see people are leaving, so I'll just go on to the very last slides, which just show you how to engage. So the online forum can be found from the IFR for NPO website. There's this button here for forum. It's a bit like a sort of Facebook or LinkedIn, but specifically for stakeholders with an interest in this. And you can see who are the other people who've joined, where are they, you can friend them, you can message them. There are different forums with different questions and topics to engage in. So please do join that and check that out. And then here, this button, subscribe, is better. It will not be an inbox clutterer. It's only every couple of months or so, but just to make sure it doesn't pass you by and you don't miss it by accident, because we're all busy. So do check that out. So we'll send you the link. After this, we'll send you an email. Edmund, do you want to do these slides? I can't remember who's supposed to do these. Do you want to come in?
No, it's fine, Sam, but I think more importantly, there's a question in the chat box. Just address that.
I can't see it. Why can't I see the chat? It's disappeared somewhere. Can you read it for me?
I'll read it out for you. This is from Kahiso, and he says, do we have a template example for the few reporting template potentials?
That's a really good question. And that also was discussed by the advisory groups. So at the moment, there's so many options and alternatives on the table at this point of the consultation paper that we're not able to present each one with a kind of sample, this is what it would look like. We are proposing to do that for the exposure draft. So after this consultation paper, the exposure draft in 2023 will include sort of sample templates and disclosures for what it would look like. But it's not really practical to do that with the consultation paper because there's just so many different alternatives on the table. It's a really good question that we debated long and hard. We did agree that we would try and spell out the implications for different alternatives. So much as they're written in narrative, we've tried to set out the advantages and disadvantages for different groups of stakeholders for each of the alternatives so that there's a sense of what it would look like. But do also reach out to the project and in the forum. If there's specific questions around that, we'd be really, really happy to try and answer those. Really good question.
Excellent. All right. Thank you so much, Sam. You did a fantastic job as usual. I'm just looking for my video there so that you can also see my eyes and how grateful I am for the work that you've done in the Republic of South Africa. Just getting us up to speed with what is going on with this great initiative. And I think you put it very well to say we really need to take this opportunity. Let's stay in touch, folks. Let's not waste this meeting so that it's just one of those meetings. No, it shouldn't be. This should be the beginning of a great and very profound cooperation towards having a wonderful product that we can all use and also with which espouses our shared values. So I just want to thank you all for participating. And if you had noticed, we were recording this session. So for those of you who have colleagues who wish to be here, but couldn't be here, look, those links that we gave you, just follow them, follow them and share this video with them and invite them to also participate in the way forward. I mean, having said that, Sam, I just want to say goodbye to everybody and wish everybody a pleasant evening and a great follow-up in this great initiative.
Thank you so much, Edmund. We will be sending you an email follow-up as well with some of the links. So don't worry, that will be there in an email and you can please share it. Please get the word out there. There are only 16 of us. Think how many stakeholders there are in South Africa. It'd be great to get Sika, as people have mentioned, and others. So please be our advocates, if you like, for engagement in the country. Thank you so much. It's a real...
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care, folks. You are a wonderful bunch.